he very specifically talked about Harry and Meghan having chosen their new life over.
Any hopes of Prince Harry returning to the royal family appear to be dashed. The palace was quick to shut down rumours of a royal comeback.
Disagreements, differences between me and some of my family. This current situation that has been ongoing for 5 years with regard to...
He didn't come with flashing cameras, no convoy, no royal choreography, just a man walking toward gates that had once been home and now felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. The cold air wrapped around him, but that wasn't what made his hand shake. The trembling came from somewhere deeper, somewhere buried under years of silence, pride, and choices that had changed everything. Because the man standing there wasn't simply returning to a place. He was returning to a question that had been haunting him for years. Had he already lost everything that mattered? And what unfolded behind those walls that day would ripple far beyond that moment, far enough that months later Meghan would be standing in a quiet driveway with suitcases lined beside her, watching iron gates close like the final page of a chapter nobody expected to end this way. People watching from the outside always imagine these moments differently. They picture announcements, carefully staged arrivals, photographers crouched behind barricades, but this was none of that. This was a man arriving alone, looking like someone who had carried too many things for too long and had finally reached the point where he couldn't carry them anymore. Something about the way he stood there said more than any headline ever could. It was the posture of someone who had spent years convincing himself he didn't need to come back, until suddenly he did.
Yes, they met. But King Charles gave Harry the cold shoulder with...
The Scottish air cut through him, but the chill wasn't what made his body tense. Anyone who has dragged emotional weight for years knows the moment when it all crashes down at once. That moment when you stop moving and everything you've been outrunning finally catches up. That's what was happening right there in that quiet space outside those gates. Because the story people tell about Harry leaving the royal family is simple. Too simple. They say it was one dramatic moment, one choice, one door slamming shut. But real fractures don't happen like that. They grow slowly. They grow through silences that stretch too long, arguments that leave scars long after the words are gone, and conversations that never happen when they should. That's what Harry carried with him that day. Not just the recent years of public battles and interviews. All of it. Every memory layered on top of the last one like bricks in a wall that had slowly risen between him and the place he once belonged.
Prince Harry has arrived in the UK today, having flown to London almost immediately after the announcement that his...
And beneath all of that sat something even heavier. Loss. Not the kind that comes from death, but the kind that comes from watching a life you once knew slowly disappear. Because Harry hadn't only lost his connection with his father, he had lost the version of himself that existed inside that world. The son with a place at the table. The prince who knew exactly where he belonged. When that identity disappears, it leaves something strange behind. A hollow question that never really goes away. Where do you fit now? For years, he had tried to answer that question by building something new. A different life, a different role, a different future thousands of miles away. But no matter how carefully that new life was constructed, the question kept returning like an echo. So what finally pushed him back? It wasn't duty. It wasn't pressure. And it definitely wasn't tradition.
She'd gone to school to get the kids out, which I think to me, and I bet you some, it made perfect sense. Meghan was...
The thing that forced Harry onto that plane was something far quieter than obligation. It was fear, not loud fear, the kind that whispers instead of shouting. The creeping realization that time doesn't pause just because you walked away from something, that the people you left behind are still aging, still changing, still living lives that might someday end before you ever find the courage to speak to them again. That thought grew in the back of his mind until it became impossible to ignore. The terrifying possibility that if he waited too long, the next time he saw his father might not be across a doorway at all, but somewhere far more final. Somewhere there would be no conversation left to have.
So miserable on leaving Clarence house. So here's what...
So he came back. No press team, no prepared statement, no carefully crafted narrative, just Harry walking through those doors knowing whatever waited inside might change everything. And the truth is, something had already changed before he even arrived. The man stepping into that house wasn't the same man who had left years earlier. Something inside him had shifted quietly during that long stretch of distance and silence. Most people imagine that meeting happening in a room full of formalities, staff hovering nearby, advisors whispering instructions instructions, the heavy machinery of royal protocol grinding quietly in the background, but that's not what he found. The room was empty. Charles was waiting alone, no aides, no courtiers, no one there to soften the moment or manage the emotions that might explode between them. Just a father standing across from his son after years of distance that had stretched so wide it felt almost impossible to cross. Harry had prepared himself for anger, for coldness, for the version of Charles that becomes distant when conflict grows too loud. But what he saw instead caught him completely off guard. Charles looked tired, not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, the kind that builds slowly over years of holding yourself together in public while something inside your family quietly breaks apart behind closed doors. Harry expected confrontation. What he walked into was grief, and grief hits differently. You can push back against anger. You can defend yourself, argue, storm out of the room if you need to. But grief just sits there, heavy and quiet, pulling at something in your chest you weren't prepared to feel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Two men carrying different versions of the same wound standing across from each other, suddenly unsure where to begin. But here's the part nobody outside that room understood. Charles hadn't been completely silent during those years apart. There had been gestures, small ones, easy to dismiss if you were determined to believe nothing had changed. Support quietly passed along for the Invictus Games, messages delivered through trusted people, and one small ritual that never stopped. Every birthday, a simple message. 4 words. Always my son, not a speech, not a reconciliation proposal. Just those 4 words arriving year after year, no matter how bitter the public divide became. At first, Harry tried to ignore them, convince himself they were meaningless, symbolic, strategic. But over time, those messages did something unexpected. They wore down the wall he had built, because deep down, he understood what they really meant. They meant the door had never fully closed. And then, standing there in that quiet room, Charles finally spoke the sentence that cracked the entire moment open. "Come home, Henry, not Prince Harry. Not Duke of Sussex, just Henry. The boy who climbed trees at Highgrove. The son who rode in the back seat during long countryside drives. The version of him that existed before the world turned his life into a global spectacle. For a second, the walls Harry had built over years of interviews, statements, and distance seemed to weaken all at once. But then Charles reached across the desk and slid something toward him. A folder. Inside it sat the part nobody had warned him about. Because buried in that paperwork was an offer that could change everything, but only under one brutal condition, and Harry was about to discover exactly what that condition was. The folder didn't look dramatic. No royal crest stamped across the front, no thick red seal warning of the storm hidden inside, just plain documents sitting quietly between them on the desk. But the moment Harry touched it, he felt the weight of what it represented. Because this wasn't just paperwork. This was the past sliding back across the table toward him, asking if he was ready to pick it up again. Charles didn't push him, didn't explain. He simply waited, watching the way his son's eyes moved across the first page, then the second. And with every line Harry read, a strange mix of familiarity and disbelief started building inside his chest. Because what was written there wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a lecture. It was something far more complicated. An opening, not a full return to the life he had left, not a complete restoration of everything that had been lost, but a path back into the royal world, carefully structured, carefully controlled, a way to reconnect with his duties, his father, his place in a system that had once defined his entire identity. For a moment, the room felt warmer. Years of tension seemed to soften in the quiet space between them. Because somewhere beneath the public drama and the endless headlines, this was still a father offering his son a road home. But then Harry reached the final pages, and everything changed. Because the last condition wasn't written loudly. It wasn't emphasized with bold ink or dramatic phrasing. It was simply stated almost casually, like a detail that should have been obvious all along. If Harry returned to this world, he would return alone. No shared role, no dual identity, no middle ground between two competing lives. The system had no space for that. For a long moment, Harry just stared at the paper, his mind racing through years of choices, memories, promises. Everything he had built since walking away flashed through his thoughts all at once. And that's when the door opened. Not gently, suddenly. Prince William stepped into the room. His expression wasn't the explosive anger people often imagine when they thought about the fractured relationship between the brothers. It was something colder, something harder, the look of someone than watching a decision unfold that might reshape everything forever. He crossed the room quickly, stopping beside the desk. Harry didn't speak. William's eyes dropped to the folder, then lifted back to his brother. "Sign that," he said quietly, "and you don't just lose her, you lose yourself." The words hung in the room like a warning bell no one could silence. Charles pushed back immediately, tension snapping into the air. Years of complicated family history suddenly crowded into that single space. Father, sons, duty, resentment, loyalty all colliding at once. And Harry stood between them with the pen still resting in his hand. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the room. No one moved. For a moment, the future seemed to balance on the smallest possible edge. One signature that could pull him back into the world he once knew, or one decision to walk away again. Harry slowly lowered the pen. Then he stood up. And without signing anything, he walked out of the room. The quiet that followed him down the hallway felt heavier than any argument could have been. But the real storm wasn't waiting in London. It was waiting back in California. Because when Harry returned to Montecito, something in the house immediately felt wrong. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a strange stillness that sat in the air like a warning nobody had spoken aloud. He stepped inside and called her name. Nothing. No music drifting through the house, no voices in the next room. Just silence stretching through the hallways like an empty stage after a performance ends. Then footsteps echoed from upstairs. Slow, measured. Meghan appeared at the top of the staircase holding her phone, her posture calm and perfectly composed. "You're back," she said. Not warm, not hostile, just an observation. Harry froze halfway across the room. Something about the atmosphere felt different, controlled, calculated. She descended the stairs slowly, studying him with the kind of sharp awareness that notices changes before anyone says a word. "Did something happen?" she asked. Harry hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything. "You're lying," she said softly, not angry, just certain. She stepped closer, the space between them shrinking with every movement. "You've changed," she said. "What did he say to you?" Harry tried to brush it off, said he had only gone to see his father, that it didn't mean anything. But Meghan was already watching him in that focused way that strips every excuse down to its core. "Did you go to see him?" she asked quietly, "or did you go to choose him?" The question landed like a crack through glass, because this wasn't just about the visit. It was about the entire life they had built together, a life built on the story of walking away from the royal world. And suddenly, Harry's phone lit up. A message appeared across the screen before he could hide it. "The announcement is ready when you are." Will he keep that promise? Or will the next chapter of this war finally bring everything into the open?